The iPad mini is Apple's small version of the iPad Air that has quickly become my favorite iPad to use because of its size and design. So why would you go with an iPad mini over another iPad? What are the best use cases for the iPad mini? And should you get it over a Kindle for reading? I'm going to answer all of those questions and more, and first, let's talk about why you would choose an iPad mini over another iPad like the iPad Air, and that's of course because of the iPad mini's size. The iPad mini's 8.3-inch display makes it slightly larger than my Kindle Paperwhite, but it's still much smaller than my iPad Air. It's designed to be the perfect iPad to hold in your hand for long periods of time thanks to its size and 293 grams of weight. My hands haven't gotten strained or tired once while using this iPad, and it's by far the easiest sized iPad to read on, which is one scenario I think the iPad mini is better suited for than the iPad Air. Now, if you're trying to decide between the iPad Air and the iPad mini, my advice generally here is if you plan to read on your iPad a lot or just hold it in your hands most of the time and you don't need a keyboard with it, I would go for the iPad mini. Where I'd go for the iPad Air is if you want to draw a lot on your iPad with an Apple Pencil and you want as much screen real estate as possible to draw on, or if you think you'll want to type on your iPad, then I'd go for the iPad Air since Apple doesn't make a keyboard attachment for the iPad mini. Plus, I'd argue the iPad mini screen size isn't really designed for typing up documents. And if you want to see a more in-depth video on choosing between the iPad mini, the iPad Air, and an iPad Pro, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that thumbs up button below to see that video. So those are my thoughts generally on the size of the iPad mini, but of course, also let me know what you think. Like, what do you use an iPad for, and do you think the iPad mini would be appropriate for that use? Let me know down in the comments. The next standout feature for the iPad mini for me is its processor. It's been able to handle everything I've thrown at it over the past 6 months, and the iPadOS gaming experience has also been pretty good. Another thing I love about the iPad mini is that Apple gave it a USB-C port. Now all of my iPads and Macs share the exact same charging cable, which is very convenient. Now another thing I really like about the iPad mini is its battery life. I typically use my iPad mini for 1 to 2 hours per day, and with that use, I'm typically seeing about a week's worth of battery life. Another standout feature that's been great on the iPad mini has been its speakers. Now they're not life-changing by any means, but they do sound good for what they are, especially if you're doing something like watching a YouTube video while lounging in bed or on a couch. And in my experience, they'll also sound better generally than the speakers you'll find on an iPhone. The next great thing about this iPad is its support for the Apple Pencil. Even though I wouldn't say the mini is the ideal iPad for note-taking or especially drawing, it's still very convenient to have this functionality if this is the only iPad you plan on owning. And for quick note-taking, it's pretty great. Also, the Apple Smart Cover you can get for the iPad mini, like with previous generations of iPads, is great, especially if you want to use it to prop up your mini to read on while lying down on your side. Now, if you're planning to read on your iPad a lot, specifically ebooks, another question you may have is should you go for the iPad mini or go for a Kindle? Now, I obviously own both of these devices, and if you're asking me which one I would choose for a device that I'm primarily planning to read ebooks on, the answer to that question for me would be a Kindle. The Kindle's e-ink screen also gives it an advantage over the iPad for reading books because it actually looks like black text on a white page, and it doesn't feel like you're reading off a computer screen like the iPad mini screen does. Another benefit I've found with the Kindle for reading is because its web browser isn't very good and it doesn't have any other apps, you don't have the same temptation to easily switch away from your book to another app like a social media app. Amazon also makes it pretty easy to send articles you find on your iPhone or other Apple devices to the Kindle app as well, which will make articles available to read directly on your Kindle device. Speaking of which, for more long-term reviews like this one or on products like our upcoming review of the Kindle Paperwhite, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Now, if you want to read on your device but also surf the web, download apps, watch YouTube videos, obviously the iPad mini is going to be the device for you. But let's say you want to try to mimic the Kindle ecosystem on an iPad mini. Well, you can, sort of. Amazon does make the Kindle app available for iPads, and you can try and mimic the black and white look of the Kindle by going into Settings, searching for color filters, and then turning on grayscale, which will turn the entire screen to black and white. And I use this feature a lot, especially at night, to help keep the iPad mini's screen a bit less enticing so I don't stay up too late. Next up, let's talk about iPadOS 15, which introduced some pretty cool new features that I've used quite a bit over the past 6 months. Like quick notes with the Apple Pencil, screen sharing over FaceTime, and the new spatial audio features of FaceTime and new noise cancellation modes. The iPad mini, like other new Apple products, also features a 12-megapixel wide-angle camera which enables center stage, where the iPad mini's camera will zoom in and out and pan the camera around with you, keeping you in frame. It's perfect for those situations where more people join your video call, so you'll see the camera kind of zoom out to keep everyone in frame, or for situations where you're video calling someone and you need to go to the kitchen to start dinner and you just want to be able to place the iPad down and start cooking dinner and still converse with this person while staying in frame and not having to constantly go over to the iPad and readjust it. iPadOS 15 also includes one of my favorite new features called Focus Modes, which can help you focus by blocking out certain app notifications, and you can signal your status to others as well. And best of all, when you enable a focus mode, it'll sync from your iPad mini to all of your other Apple devices, which is awesome. Alright, so those are all of the things I like about the iPad mini. Now let's talk about what I don't like. First up, the display. I do wish that Apple made a version of this iPad with a ProMotion display that supported HDR content, given the size is so perfect for curling up in bed to watch content on. I'd definitely pay $150 more for a version that had that. Now, another thing I wish the iPad mini had is Face ID. I own an iPad Pro that has Face ID built in, and while I do like the implementation of Touch ID into the iPad mini sleep-wake button, there's no getting around it. Face ID, in my experience, is just a better way to authenticate into an iPad. Now, if you disagree, let me know in the comments, but basically I think if Apple just made a mini-sized version of the iPad Pro, I'd be set. All in all though, the iPad mini is probably the iPad I use the most. I always go for it over my 12.9-inch iPad Pro and my iPad Air when I want to read on it while in bed or lounging on a couch. To me, it has the perfect size, weight, and overall form factor. The iPad mini retails starting at $499 US for 64 gigs of storage and $649 for 256 gigs of storage, and comes in space gray, which is the color that I have, pink, purple, and starlight. And you can use the purchase links here in this video and in the description below if you plan to purchase an iPad mini. Now, if you're uncertain about which storage option to choose when purchasing an iPad mini, here's my general advice. If all you plan to do on your iPad mini is just read, surf the web, watch videos, basically just consume a lot of content, I think the 64 gig version should be fine for you, and that's the version I chose for myself. The only scenario where I'd go with the 256 gig version is if I needed to download a ton of movies and TV shows for a flight. And I mean like more than 10 at a time. Or I know I'm going to be keeping a lot of photos and videos and documents on the iPad, then I'd go for the 256 gig version. If you have any further questions about the iPad Air, or you want to share your experience with one, leave a comment below. And if you're looking for what to watch next, check out some of our other Apple videos, like our 6 months later review of the iPad Air, the iPad Pro, the iPhone 13 Pro, and the HomePod Mini, and so many more. So make sure you check those out and subscribe to the channel and hit that thumbs up button to see more videos like this one. For 6 months later, I'm Josh Tedder. Thanks for watching.